Welcome back. We are continuing our review of last week. So we've created our first table, a student table. If I click on database structure, there's just one table there. If I click on browse table, we can see the two columns, and we have 4 records in there. So let's continue with where we left off. So we saw the commands are the same as last week, but every SQL editor, this one is DB Browser, every SQL editor is going to be slightly different. So we saw in this one, for example, we don't use a semicolon like we did last week. And there were other small variations. We had to play around with the command a little bit, the spacing, to get it to work, but it's pretty much the same, and we'll get used to it very quickly. Just look at the lower window, the output window, and if you get red down here, just read it and see if you can figure out what the error is. If it's something that's really puzzling you, send me a screenshot. Just hit print screen. And you don't need to put this into a separate document. What I found a lot of people are doing when they send me screenshots, they are creating separate files. When you email a screenshot, just right-click into the body of the email and paste in the screenshot. Okay, so the next thing we have to do is deleting from the database. And this database only has one table, the students table. And what are we deleting? Well, we're deleting a record, but which record? So we're using the where keyword here, where we have a particular email address. So again, the syntax is very flexible. Some people like seeing it all on one line. Some people put the keywords on their own individual line. So we'll get used to it pretty quickly. So last time I got an error message, an error when I copied it in like this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy it all in as one line, and then I'm going to readjust it for readability. So let's copy that. We'll come over here, we'll paste that in. And do we even have a student? Do we have an email address called Andy? Maybe not. Let's come back here. No, we don't. But we do have one called Jerry. So let's go ahead and delete his record from the database. So we're going to delete the entire row here. So we have 4 rows, and we're going to delete the first one. So let's come back here. And again, it's a good idea to copy and paste as much of this as you can, not just to minimize errors, but also save keystrokes. Okay, so this stuff can be really tiring when you're typing all the time. So I've just copied in Jerry's email address. I'm going to execute this SQL statement, and if there are any errors, I'll see it down here. But before I do that, I'm just going to click right by the where statement, the W, press enter, because this is how I like to read my SQL. So let's execute. Execution finished without errors. Let's click on Browse Data, and there we go. Jerry's record is now gone. Okay, so that is deleting a record. Now, let's say we want to update a record. So we're going to update the students table again, and we're going to set the name to Maria. Now, if we were to just go ahead and execute this by itself, what would the result be? It would change all the names to Maria. So if we look here, every name would become Maria, and that's not what we want. We don't want Andy and Jeff and everybody else in the table to become Maria. We only want Mary to be renamed to Maria. So this record only is the one we want to change. So what we're going to do is we're going to search the table, search the database for rows where we have an email address of mary@school.ca, and when we find it, then we're going to change the name from Mary to Maria. So let's look at the command again. So update the student database, And which record you want to change? Well, you want to change the name column. You want to change it to Maria, but not for all the records, not for all the rows, but only where the email address is mary@school.ca. So this is how I like to see the command, but for whatever reason, when I copy it into SQL, DB SQL, I get messages. So I'm just going to copy it all in as one line. So let's do a right-click copy. We'll come over here to Execute SQL. And now I'm going to set it up the way I like to read it. So I like the keywords, update, set, and where. Notice the keywords are always capitalized. Update, set, and where, okay, on separate lines. That's just my personal preference. Maybe you can read the whole line all in one shot, but for me, I need to break it up into small pieces so I can understand exactly what my SQL is doing. So update, what are we updating? The students table. Okay, and well, what about the students table are we going to update? We're going to update the name column, and we're going to put the name Maria in there, but we don't want to do it for every row. We only want to do it where we have an email address of mary@school.ca. So which one are we going to change? We are going to change that one, and hopefully we'll see Maria in there. So let's go ahead and execute. Oops, and again we have an error message. It doesn't exactly like my code. So we just have to go through it and figure out exactly what we did wrong. We see an underline by email. Let's go look at our database. So we have email over here. And I think that was just an anomaly. So when I come over here and I just simply placed in a couple of spaces, okay, we see that it accepted the execution of the command. So let's go back to Browse Data, and we can see here instead of the name Mary, we see Maria. I'm going to try this again because this is kind of bothering me here. I'm not sure why this particular SQL editor is giving me those error messages. So we can figure this out together. So let's do the same thing with Jeff. We'll do it exactly the way we did it before. So we're going to change Jeff to Jeffrey. And what is his email address? So again, we do typos all the time. So I'm going to copy and paste that right in there. Paste. And let's do it with no spaces after the equal sign and see if we get an error message. So again, Jeff, after we execute this successfully, the name will change to Jeffrey. So let's go ahead and execute, and for whatever reason there was no problem. I think this is just an anomaly. There was no error in the code. Maybe this is the result of just simply doing a copy and paste, and you know, nothing serious. So let's continue. So that is updating a record. Okay, let's continue. And of course, we spent a lot of time on the select statement. So here we're just selecting all the columns from the student database. And it's a good idea to actually type these things out so at least you get a little bit of practice. So let's go ahead and select. Remember, keywords have to be capitalized. And what are we going to select? Everything. How do we do everything again? With a star. And where are we going to select everything from? From the student database. Okay, so it is a good idea to write things create things in lowercase. If you look at my data, okay, the name field is in lowercase, email, and even my data, you know, if I do have a name here with capital letters, only the first letter is going to be capitalized. That's really good. We want to avoid putting uppercase data whenever possible because we don't want to confuse it with the keywords from the SQL language. So let's go ahead and run this query. And again, it doesn't like our output. So again, I think the only problem here is that we're doing a copy and paste. And if we just tweak this a little bit, it should work fine. So I don't see any error messages there. So I think, let's type this out and run it again, all from one line. And there it is. It is showing us the whole table. Let's spread it across multiple lines and run it again. Exact same thing. Now, we had a lot of these select statements, so I recommend that you go through them one by one. So in this case, we're selecting everything from the students table where the email is Jeffrey. So we're only going to see Jeffrey's record here. So let's copy this in and paste it. Okay, so let's see here. I don't see any error message. So again, what is this going to do? Select all the columns from the students table where we have an email of jeffrey@school.ca. So it's going to pull out the record for Jeffrey only. So let's go ahead and run it. And again, we have that little red thing there, which doesn't mean we have a syntax. It just didn't like us doing a copy and paste. I guess that's something we have to get used to here. Okay, so copy. Okay, select all fields from students. Okay, where email equals Jeffrey. And then the problem was on the third line. It said there was a syntax error. Let's run it again. And this time it works. Okay, so there we go. And let's look at the output of it. And we see Jeffrey's record. So I'll run it one more time. And there is the resulting record for Jeffrey. Now you can resize this if Jeffrey has a long name. Let's go on to the next select statement. Okay, now what are we doing here? We're just looking at all the names in the database. So select the name column. Last time we selected all the columns, star. Now we're just going to select the name column, okay, from students. And I'm going to type this out because it doesn't seem to like copy and paste. So select the name column from students. Now this has the autocomplete feature. See here, it's guessing what I want to type next. I'm just going to press enter. Let's run our query, and this time it worked perfectly, and you can see all the names in the database. Let's continue. And the last one is very similar, but what are we doing here? Okay, we're showing all the columns from the students table, but this time we're going to order them alphabetically. Okay, so let's do a copy here, paste it in to our database. Okay, and let's execute it and hope for the best. Okay, this time we got no error message, but look at this. This time it was ordered alphabetically, okay, by the first letter of the name. Now, keep in mind, this here is not the table. This is just a small portion of the table, and that resulted from your SQL query. Your table, again, if you want to see it, you click on Browse Table, you execute your SQL statement or your query, and you just get a portion of it right here. So in your first assignment, you're going to be reviewing all these statements that you looked at last week.